Yes,
Ji,
yes, we can hear you. Yeah.
Ji, thank you. Let me give a very brief introduction about Lukman. Lukman Sharif is right now currently working as a principal architect at APSec.ai. It's an API security product company, and right now leads a team of about 20 developers on microservices. Lukman Sharif comes with 17 plus years of experience, and he has performed at various roles at various MNCs as a software developer to technical lead to Scrum Master to technical architect, and also as a solution architect. And right now, he's a principal architect at APISec.ai. He has majorly worked in Java and JE technologies and cloud computing, and he comes with a very deep expertise on API designs and API management and API security. Uh, right now, he is presenting about microservices architecture and services and architecture about microservices and how to go about it. But as I know Lukman, he is very passionate about learning and teaching, and teaching is one of his very passionate part-time, I should say, as a part-time hobby for him. And he also takes a various corporate trainings and MNCs, and his main topic for corporate training is about cloud computing and also this microservices architecture. In fact, when MFIRD upskilling session started at Hyderabad, we started with Lukman's session, and he gave a session about various technologies relevant in the industry and how to slide up from the existing knowledge base. And just to give a technical passionate, I mean, how he's technically passionate about technology. Uh, at a time when cloud was just a term in India, he has given a full-fledged session on cloud-based services to various MNCs. So this is a brief introduction about Lukman. Um, I would ask all the participants to give a very hearing it to microservices to the current session that is being given. And I would ask all the participants to please park your questions to the later end of the session, so that the session is very technical, will be technical. And if you can just make a note down of all your questions, and we'll be giving time at the end of the session, so you can post a session. But if it is very essential, and you can just post your session in the chat window. With this, I would like to ask Lukman to take up this and start the session. Jazakallah.
Jazakallah, Yazmi. Yeah, we'll start the session. So I would request everyone to go on mute. You can unmute only when you have any questions you can ask. Otherwise, please be on mute. Okay, so let me start. This microservices is a kind of a buzzword nowadays in the industry. Everybody is talking about microservices. Every company is, looking at migrating their applications into microservices. People are talking about its advantages, its challenges, and even if you see a lot of job openings, you see microservices as a keyword being added in the JD there. So let's see what exactly is microservices and how it really benefits and what are the challenges associated with it. So this is my agenda. So I'll talk about basically what is microservice introduction, and then at a high level I'll go over the various patterns, because this is one of the pattern, and then we'll compare it with monolith, and our core concepts will be on the advantages and the challenges with microservices. If time permits, I'll just talk about the various patterns of microservices as well, and we'll quickly go over a couple of case studies to understand how industry is using microservices. So this is overall my agenda for today's session. We don't have much time. I think we have only 1.5 hours, so I'll try to complete as much as possible here. So at the end of the session, we'll have a Q&A, some time for that. So you can ask any question. So to understand microservices, let me start with what exactly is the challenge today and why these new paradigms of programming or architecture are coming in the industry, what exactly we are trying to solve, or what exactly we are trying to achieve. So to talk about that, uh, basically we need to understand the current market situation and the way technology is being adapted in the market. Earlier, technology was just a support for any business, for example, for a banking business, for a retail business, or any merchandise business. Technology was just a kind of a support. IT was supported, but nowadays those businesses are completely dependent on the IT. IT is actually running those businesses. Without IT, those businesses doesn't exist, and the new innovations in the business side are also happening because of the IT support and IT innovations only. So the markets are growing a lot. They are dynamic, and a lot of disruptions are happening in the market. And if your business doesn't, quickly adopt the new technology, obviously, any question? Sorry for some background noise. Please be on mute. So if your business cannot adopt to the changes happening in the industry, to the new innovations coming in the technology, if it cannot adopt, then obviously it lags behind in the competitive market. So all businesses are nowadays running fast to quickly adopt new technologies and enhance their IT systems for actually to support their business. So the biggest question here is, are your IT systems ready to support the businesses? If your business is growing and if they want to adapt to new technologies or new any disruption that is in the market, uh, are your IT systems ready to support? If it is something like this, your business says that they want this new approach for their business and some new technologies to be adopted, and your IT takes let's say next 6 months for you the completion of the project, then it is too much of time, and by that time you will see a lot of competition in the market, and if your go to market time is very delayed, then somebody else will capture the market, right from launching your new product to reaching out new customer base, to expanding your business to new geographies. Any such thing needs new technologies to be adopted, and if it is not quickly adopted, then your business will go for a toss. So and your legacy IT systems, usually those who have worked on systems that were developed in 10, 15 years ago, you might have seen this. A new project or a new change request or a new enhancement feature comes, then a lot of operation, a lot of the work happens on the requirement analysis and design and development, and then fitting that into a existing legacy system. How what impact happens on the system, and a complete impact analysis will be done on that, and then the system will be ready for deployment. So that will take a lot of time. So people have adopted agile model to make it faster. But agile is just a methodology that helps in making your processes faster. But can technology quickly adapt it? Can a new feature quickly fit into an existing legacy system? Or what impacts will it have? So that area is a challenge here. So overall, dynamic markets is a challenge, and your IT system needs to support the dynamic markets. So what are the complexity factors of the IT systems? Why systems are so complex, and what are the things we need to consider when we are picking up a new technologies on the systems? So nowadays systems are much bigger compared to earlier systems that we are seeing in the industry everywhere. And compared to older systems, nowadays these systems used to be lot of interconnected with lot of other systems. Lot of integration needs to happen with external systems, external communication systems, let us say social media channels, let us say other partners of your business. Lot of other systems used to be interconnected. Earlier the systems were the silo applications that were deployed in your data center, but now it is not like that. A lot of interconnections need to happen. So that's a major change that happened in the industry, that made systems more complex, more and more integrations, and every integration is different usually. And the other factor that is making systems more complex is data. Lot of data is being produced. Lot of data is being processed nowadays, and data is everywhere. You need to process data, and that is the only way you can actually cater your business. If you cannot process the real time data, if you cannot process a lot of data, you cannot actually cater your business, right from your customers data to catalogs, to your images, to your analytics and patterns of usage. So many things, so many things. So as the systems are growing bigger, the complexity is increasing. Complexity usually increases exponentially with size of the system. As the size increases, complexity doesn't increase linearly with the size; it exponentially increases. I mean, some increase in the size increases more and more complexity in the system. So these are the challenges. To handle these challenges, industry is coming up with new approaches in terms of methodologies, in terms of deployment approaches, in terms of uh, hardware innovations like cloud computing, a lot of innovation. So similarly, the system architecture itself have evolved a lot to handle these challenges. So this microservices is such a advancement in the system architectures, application architectures, so that makes it easier for handling these challenges. So microservice architectures have evolved as a solution to the scalability and innovation challenges. There are two major terms, but there are many advantages. But at a high level, we can talk about these two things. Scalability. We need to add more and more features to the service, and we need to add more and more users to the application. So that scalability of the application and innovation challenges, any new technologies adoption, any new interconnectivities and integrations. So to handle these challenges which are with monolithic architectures, this new approach has been evolved. So what exactly is microservice? Microservice is an architectural style. What is an architectural style? Architectural style, in other words, is also called as architectural pattern, like design patterns, right? I think everybody has learned design patterns in their college days. So, like design patterns, there are architectural patterns also. What is a pattern? Pattern is normally a standard way of solving a common problem, right? So, for architectures also, there are a lot of common challenges. So there are patterns that are evolved to solve those challenges. Uh,
ज्यादा आवाज कौन सा बता दो
Okay, can you please go on mute if somebody is not talking? There is some background noise. Jazakallah. Okay, so architectural pattern, like design patterns in architecture also, whatever the challenges that the industry comes across and how effectively they were solved, what are the common ways of solving this, so that becomes a pattern. So architecture also has a lot of patterns. So microservice is such an architectural pattern. Style or pattern is the same thing in this terminology here. So it's an architectural pattern, and what does it talk about? It talks about developing an application into a small suite of services. The smaller set of services instead of a one large application, and each service is running in its own process, and they are communicating with other services. And the other thing is they are independently deployable. We'll talk about that further. So at a high level, this is a definition. A lot of definitions you find on the internet about microservices, but the key terms are these, which I highlighted here. So this is architectural pattern, and this talks about dividing your application into smaller chunks or smaller services, and they're independently running. So that is microservice. So let's talk about what is the software architecture, what are the patterns, and then how is it different in terms of microservices. So architectural pattern or architectural style is a set of principles which shape an application. When you create an application, when you create an architecture of an application, so there are some guidelines or some principles that you follow so that the problem is effectively solved. So it defines an abstract framework for a family of systems in terms of patterns of structured organization. So this is a more technical definition. It just says that okay, a common set of problems and a common family of patterns are available. So we'll see what are the software architecture patterns. I have not captured all the patterns here. There are a lot of architecture patterns, but most commonly known or commonly used patterns. Monolithic architecture. This is in terms of the bundling and deployment of the application, how it looks like. layered architecture, and it's the most common architecture that is used everywhere, where you have multiple layers like your UI layer or front end layer, and then a middle tier layer, and then a back end database layer. That is one example of a layered architecture. And your TCP/IP protocols is also an example of layered architecture, where what happens is each layer processes your data and then passes on the control to next layer. Next layer again performs some operations. So that's a layered architecture. Pipes and filters architecture. This is in unique cases, this is used where a lot of data processing happens, not the business functionality, but a lot of data processing. So you provide data, and one filter processes the data, performs some operations, or maybe some sanitize the data, and then passes on to next filter, and then it passes on to next filter. So in between the filters, the channel that is used is called as a pipe. Whatever the way of communication you're using, that is called as a pipe. So it's a pipes and filters architecture. A blackboard architecture is not a very standard architecture, but randomly you started putting all your components together and trying to connect it. Like you draw on a blackboard some component A, component B, and try to draw lines. So that way architecture gets evolved. Over a period of time, it becomes a huge system, and then you divide into again services. So it's a blackboard architecture. Microkernel architecture, most common example is your operating systems, where you have a kernel at the center, and then you have layers on top of that. A service-oriented architecture also is like microservices, where we are talking about smaller services. There is a slight difference. We'll talk in further slides. Service-oriented architecture, again, that is there in the industry for more than a decade now, where we have multiple components interacting with each other via a common service bus, usually called ESB, Enterprise Service Bus, and a lot of frameworks are there around that to handle it. So that's service-oriented architecture. And then the microservice architecture, we'll go in further details. It's a pattern where it talks about dividing your services into very smaller services and interconnecting them. So this is at a high level about architectural patterns. So we'll get into our core concept here. So let's try to see what is monolith and then compare with microservices. So microservices actually came in contrast to monolith architecture to solve the challenges with monolith architecture. So most common applications, legacy application, at least those which are 5 years, 10 years, 15 years old applications, they're all monolith applications. So what exactly is monolith? Let's see what are the features. In your experience, you might have worked on these kind of projects. Release every few months. Most commonly, organizations have a release, a quarterly release, or a bi-monthly release, or a major release and a minor release. Those kind of releases. So every release takes a month or 2 or 3 months of time. So what do you do in all that duration? You take all the requirements and you work on the scope of that release. You freeze the requirements. Okay, for next 3 months, our team is going to work on these requirements for the system, and then all the developers work on those requirements, and then testing happens. Everything is done. Finally, one application with new features is ready. I mean, the same old application, but the new features are added into that application, and that is ready after testing. So you release it. So it takes a huge amount of time, maybe 2 months, 3 months of time. And then an application which has huge range of features, which is generally like evolved over a period of time, and lot of features are there. For example, if you take e-commerce application, your application is handling the customers, maybe or handling the orders, and in orders it is handling the customer, maybe validations, maybe order validations, maybe it is also checking the inventory, it is also processing the shipments. Lot of features are there in that one application. And because application is huge, lot of features are there, the team is very big. As the team size is big, it is very difficult to manage an application. But usually these kind of applications have a very huge team. More than 30 is one, just a number given. But I worked on an application where we had a single project. We had 60 developers and 40 testers. It's a team of 100 members. We were working together. So those kind of applications are called monolith applications. So in such applications, what happens is debugging becomes a big problem because it's a huge application. Whenever you want to input some data, you have to input data at the very beginning layer of the application, whether it is a UI layer or maybe some API layer. But at the very beginning of layer of the application, you have to start processing the data, and the code changes you made are the problem that occurred right at some point in the application. So to reach to that point and then to actually verify what exactly is happening, so you need to have understanding of the entire flow, and you need to check all the logs, and then you'll be able to actually reach that pinpoint that problem that is occurring. So debugging is a challenge. And how about bringing new technologies? That's a big problem. We'll talk about that also as well. So these are the typical characteristics. So basically, monolith is a huge application. So, but you might have this question when you say monolith application. Every organization has huge applications, right? So, do they have all of them have these challenges? So to understand that, let us see how a monolith looks like. Then you'll see what exactly is the challenge. Basically, when you say monolith, it's a huge application. It has a lot of features, but it is from the deployment perspective, it is bundled as a single, bundle, a single package. Maybe for Java people, it's a jar file or war file, or but based on whatever the technology. But it is a single bundle or package that is built after all the changes are done, and this package is deployed on any application server, your IaaS or Tomcat or WebLogic, WebSphere, JBoss, whatever. So one on an application server, it is deployed. So if you see this figure, it looks like this. So this bundle, the one in the dark color, the black color one, is it has a UI layer. I mean, all your HTML files, JS, CSS, all HTML files are also part of that bundle. Your service layer, all the services are part of that bundle. All the business functionality. And then if you any integration adapters are there, or any integration code base is there, even that is also part of the same jar file. And any DAO layer, data access layer, your DAO objects and database code for database connectivity, everything is part of this bundle. And any other configurations, also your libraries are also part of this bundle. So it becomes a very huge package. So this package is deployed on one application, let's say Tomcat server. So this is a monolith application. Monolith is not just about having a more number of features in an application, but it is one application, and I say it is one single bundle that is applied. And almost all legacy applications are like that. You go and add more features, you make application more modular by adding more and more layers, by adding different services, but they are all within the same application. So these, for example, order management is talking to inventory management. This is within the process communication. I mean, a class is invoking another class, an object is invoking another object. That's it. It's not a integration with another component altogether. So inventory management, user management are not different components, because it's the same database, right? The multiple services are talking to same database. One is writing into database, another one is reading from database, and it is the same UI that is catering. So you have all components within the same bundle. So that is a monolith architecture. So, but why these? Why applications were developed like this, and what are the challenges? We'll see. So, as I told you, right, the difference is not just the size; it is one single application. So this is how I was trying to depict it here. So a lot of developers are adding their code, making their changes and fixing bugs and adding new features. A lot of development is happening here, and after all the development is done, it's one single build. The code that is checked in from each developer is into one single repository. So it's a single build. One build happens and it creates one package, and testing is on that entire application. Even though all the parts of the application are not touched, you still have to test that entire application. So testing is on that build that happened after all this development is done. So each development has a different significance here. So one is maybe a small code change or a small bug fix. One may be a big feature. One may be not at all related to the other feature at all, but they're all bundled together, and they are finally released to production. So this is how a monolith development lifecycle looks like. But what are the advantages or benefits of having this kind of an application? So having this kind of a monolith application where it is a single package and single application, right? So it is development is simpler in terms of set of tools and ID. It is because it is a single bundle. It's all in with a particular technology, particular set of frameworks are used. Let us say Java and some MVC framework, and then some Spring framework, something like that. So a set of specific tools and specific ID is enough for the entire application. So every new feature you are adding, every new change you are making, you are not actually adopting new tools and not making major changes to your ID, or not adding plugins to your ID. So it becomes much simpler to go and add. So whenever there is a feature, you go and add that feature following the same technology stack. Simple to deploy, yes, because it's a single WAR file or single jar file, single package. You just have one single script or go and manually deploy it on a server, and that's it. With basic configurations, that's enough. So easy to deploy. And how about scaling? All we do in such applications is if your application server is not able to handle the load, you deploy one more instance of the same package, same WAR file, one more instance, and just add a load balancer, and that's it. So your load is balanced. But the challenge is when the application becomes larger, as the application grows, as more and more features are getting added, this application becomes very tough to maintain. So what are the challenges? Now, initially it looks very good. It's a single ID, a single set of tools or single set of plugins, and a single build, let us say, tool behind that is taking care of entire application build. That looks very good. But as the application grows, entire code base is in one place. Any new team member needs to understand, needs to, before starting, contributing in the application, that new team member needs to have a complete grip of the entire flow. Even though lot of features are very old features, they are not being touched, and lot of features are not needed to be aware of at this moment. But a new team member needs to have an entire idea to start contributing into the application. And one of the major challenges, even though you initially started with a very good modularity, okay, each layer is very clearly defined, and each separate component within that application is clearly defined. Let's say this is order management, this is user management, this is inventory, and this is product, something like this. Over a period of time, what happens is this modularity breaks. That means some developer somewhere, because of some constraint, because of maybe due to lack of knowledge, or maybe due to time constraint, or due to any other constraint, add some features into another component. Some part of the shipping processing is happening at order component. Some process of some part of inventory is happening in the product management. Something like this happens, and overall, the modularity breaks. And one more challenge is, I guess, those who have at least 10 years or more experience have experienced this a lot. ID. Generally, what happens is we have all the code base, because it's a single application. From your repository, either Git or your CVS or whatever the repository, you downloaded the entire code base into your IDE, and you are making changes and you are testing in your local. So you made a small change, just a logger statement or just a if condition, but you have to restart the application. And restart takes a lot of time, because a lot of components needs to be brought up. Entire application needs to be up, and it takes 1 minute, 2 minutes, or sometimes 5 minutes to 10 minutes for your application. So it hits your productivity a lot. So slows down the ID. So as the application grows from development side, this is a challenge. Application startup, yeah, that is what slows down ID, and this same thing. So longer startup time, that brings down your productivity. And from your CI/CD perspective, at least CD perspective, continuous deployment, that is not possible in such applications, or at least very difficult in such applications, because if you are to frequently deploy the application, obviously entire application has to be tested. So even if it is automation testing, it has to test. It has to have a complete coverage, because it's a huge application. Coverage is difficult. If it has to be manually tested, then it has to test all the features. So even though there was no change in that, just to make sure there is no regression, you have to test all the features. So that becomes a time-consuming thing. So continuous deployment becomes very difficult for you. You can deploy only after some period of time after testing is done, but you cannot daily, or you cannot weekly deploy it. So as application becomes larger, these are the challenges. How about scalability? We have seen that whenever the load is not server is not able to handle the load is high. What you are doing is you are creating one more instance, and you are just deploying one more instance and adding a load balancer so that you can route the traffic to both the instances. But usually what happens is all the components of your system may not have the same requirements. Let us say product catalog is having a huge request coming into the system for that, because a lot of users are searching for the products. But the actual order placement is happening 1 out of 100. 100 users are searching for the products, and 1 user is placing the order. So it is 1:100 in terms of the request coming, in terms of the bandwidth usage, in terms of the database access, number of connections, and all. So each component has a different set of requirements. And also in terms of processing, a component's one component needs a lot of internal memory to process. One component has a lot of CPU cycles required for processing. One component has more database calls happening. So each component has a different set of requirements. But in terms of monolith, all you do is you just create one more instance and deploy it without even without even trying to differentiate between the resource utilization, because you cannot do that. Actually, it's a single WAR file. So lot of other because you created a new instance on a new server, all the resources are added there, but you are not effectively utilizing all the resources. Let's say this application is not using a lot of memory, but still you have one server with all the basic hardware requirements there. So that is a problem. And then one more problem is from the development perspective again, your teams, even though they are working on different change requests, different enhancement requests, or different features being added into the system, they cannot work independently, because it's a single application, it's a single repository, it's a single build, and a single testing team and testing process and cycle. So they have to work closely with each other, even though they are actually independent. So it prevents teams from working independently, even though their features are independent. They are not touching each other's code base, but still they cannot work independently. And then one of the biggest challenges is technology stack. So imagine in this kind of an application, and you realize that a particular library, you are using a so-and-so version of that library, and you want to enhance it, and you want to upgrade to a newer version, because some of the features you want to use in your component. Can you do that? You need to make sure this upgrade will not impact any other component in the entire system, because it's a huge application and it's a shared library. It's one single library that is being used. It should not impact any other component in the system. That becomes very difficult. So it's just an upgrading. But what if adding a new libraries? What if adding a new technology stack altogether? For example, I want to add a rule engine into my system. I want to add a different database, let's say NoSQL database for my processing. Altogether, new frameworks, new technologies in such large application, it is very difficult to adopt. So adopting new technology stack is almost kind of impossible in such cases. Okay, so these are the challenges with microservices. So to overcome these challenges, this new approach is being adopted by industry, where we are dividing the application into smaller services. So there are each component is a different service, but the major difference is not like componentization or not modularization, but it is all about each as a different deployable unit. Earlier, it was one single package that was deployed as one large application into let us say Tomcat or any other application server. Now each one has its own package. For example, you divide your application into user management as a separate service, order management as a separate service, product management, inventory management, let's say shipment processing. These are all now divided as different services. So each one is uh, uh, built separately as a separate WAR file or jar file, whatever you call it. So a separate file, and that package is deployed on a separate instance of your application server. That is the major difference. Now, earlier it was one Tomcat server running in your production. Now it is, if you have 10 services, there are 10 Tomcat servers running. So microservices it's an approach to architecting an application by breaking down a large software application into multiple smaller services. Each service performs a specific task or business goal. And how do they interact with each other? They interact via multiple ways of interaction here, such as an API. It can be a synchronous communication, it can be asynchronous communication, but yeah, multiple ways they can interact with each other. Okay, so in simple terms, what are microservices? If you define their characteristics, they are smaller services, and those services are how do you divide them into smaller services? How do you divide your application? They are built around business capabilities. Like I took an example, order management and user management. These are various business features or business capabilities that your application performs, right? So you divide your services based on the business capabilities, based on your business domain. Your e-commerce domain has a shipment processing, order processing, reverse logistics, all these things. So based on the domain, you divide your application into smaller services. And the key thing is they are independently deployable. Basically, these three characteristics are deploy. When they are independently deployable, they are scalable as well. But if you see 1, 2, 3, yes, they are smaller services. They are built around the business domain and they are independently deployable. Each one is running in its own process or in its own application server. So these are the characteristics. Now that we have seen the challenges or problems with monolith and what is microservice actually, let's see what are the advantages. Let me come to this slide directly. So what are the advantages? What do you think are the advantages of microservices? The very basic thing is because they are independent services, each one can scale independently. We need more resources for, let us say, catalog management. Yes, you can add more resources without disturbing, without impacting other services. Each service can be developed independently without impacting others. If there is a change in, let us say, order processing, you don't have to deploy, or you don't have to build the entire application, including product and user and everything. You make changes only in that small service, and you deploy only that. So let me go over this list here. Easier to scale each individual microservice. Yes, we just discussed. Easier to maintain and evolve the system. Yes, if there is any problem occurring with the with that service, only that service is impacted. You make changes to that service. This needs an upgrade in terms of libraries, upgrades in terms of the underlying technology, or you want to make use of a different technology, or you want to add more and more new frameworks to this, or more integrations to this service to perform better. You can all do that. You can evolve this individual service easily without impacting other services. So the advantage because of that is quick build and test, because this time you made a change only to, let us say, order management. You are deploying only order management service. All you do is you test only this service, and maybe some integrations if there is a change in the integration. Otherwise, you may skip that as well. So quickly build it, deploy it, and release it without impacting other applications. So you don't have to wait for your 2 months, 3 months deployment cycle. You can have individual deployment cycles as well for each of individual services. And testing is faster. And one more advantage is in terms of management of the application. Each service is independent, so accountability is very clear. A particular team is working on, let us say, user management. Particular team is working on order management. So they have clear accountability. They are managing this particular service, so they are responsible for its issues, challenges, debugging, and its enhancements, its upgrade, everything they are responsible. So clear ownership in terms of teams and in terms of management. And now it becomes more agile. Yes, because quickly you can adapt changes. Any small change in any service will not impact other services, so you can easily deploy and quickly go to production, go to market. So increase agility. Innovation is faster because you have new technology stack adoption easier here, so faster innovation. Any new technology for independent service you can easily adopt without impacting other services. So you can fast innovate. And faster time to market because it is a faster build and release cycle and faster testing cycle. Quickly you can go to market. And it's the same thing, faster innovation and new technology adoption. So these are the various advantages you get with microservices. So now that you have seen whatever the challenges we felt in monolith architecture, you have seen almost all those challenges are kind of handled here and kind of addressed here. And the microservices looks to be a very promising architecture approach for your large applications. So do you see any challenges or any issues with microservices? Sorry. So you can speak up as well if you have any questions here, or if you want to talk about anything here at this point.
Yeah, here we need huge investment to monitor the applications and all, because there will be different microservices, and to monitor each microservices, we need DevOps person should be there, DevOps team should be there.
Yes, good point. Monitoring is a big challenge because now it is not a single application or single service monitoring. Each one is running on a different, altogether different stack altogether, different hardware, different infrastructure, different server, different application server, and independently running. So monitoring, yes, it's a big challenge for microservices. What else? So if you go in sequence, sorry. So first of all, dividing application into smaller services, yes, it becomes too much granular. Every new feature looks like a new potential microservice. So how do you, basically, in other words, if I talk about, you attempt to create a microservice for every new feature. If you are actually architecting an application and you are new to microservices, it looks like every new enhancement or every new feature for your application, okay, this should be a new microservice. So lot of potential services you feel are you find in your application. So too much of granularity, and that also becomes a challenge if too many services are created. So how do you balance between those two, creating too many services to creating less number of services? So it's a challenge in the architecture itself. How do you decide? Basically, how do you decide how many microservices and what should go in each service? And then the other challenge is, once you have decided what are the features going to each service, what are the functionalities should be part of each service. Now this, because this is one single application catering one business, these services need to talk to other services to perform the entire operations, right? So how do they interact with each other? So additionally, you have to create an interface between them. Maybe create an API, service A talking to service B. So service B should have an API exposed. That way you can talk to service A, or some queue mechanism. So in either case, they have to have a defined contract, defined object structure, or defined JSON structure, or XML structure, whatever, to define contract. So extra effort of designing communications. Earlier, if it was a single application, even though there were modules, but part of the same application, so a class or object was calling another object, and that's it. Now it is extra communication interfaces. So in terms of designing an architecture, finding out what are the services and adding interfaces is additional overhead. And also because there are additional interfaces, now there is an extra hop of converting an object into a JSON or JSON to object, or passing via that API layer. So it's an extra hop and extra latency. So it is slower in compared to an application. I mean, classes running within the same application. They are running on different servers. So extra latency for this. And how about testing? We talked about that as an advantage in our earlier slides, that you can independently test each service. That is true, but that is true only if you have a change in one single service. But an entire application can be only, ready if that is tested in terms of entire functionality, end-to-end functionality, not a single functionality. How these integrations are behaving, how these communications are behaving, how the data processing happening between each one service to other service. So to make sure everything is correct, you have to have an end-to-end flow testing. So end-to-end flow testing, if it is a single application, is much easier. If it is multiple applications, then testing becomes much complex, because you have to additionally test the interfaces. And if it is failing anywhere, finding out where exactly it failed and fixing that becomes difficult, because you have to go through all the services to identify what exactly is the challenge. So additional interfaces makes more complex in terms of testing. Let me just quickly see the chat. Yeah, quickly post the questions here. So debugging is a challenge. Debugging individual applications, individual services is easier, but if a problem occurs in the entire flow and you don't know where exactly is the problem, because your initial customer's request or whatever the business processing started at one service A and somewhere it ended in service Z. So how do you debug and identify and pinpoint the problem? You have to go through logs of all the services, or you have to consolidate logs at one place. So it becomes complex. Another big challenge is data consistency among these services. Earlier it was a single application, single database, and single transaction in which all the flow is happening. So either a transaction is committed or transaction is rolled back. But now, because they are independent applications altogether, each service is like a different application, right? So each one has its own transaction, each one has its own data and its data processing. So how do you make sure that data is consistent across all the services? What happens if one transaction is successful in one service and it fails in another service? What do you do? So data consistency is a big challenge. And security of the services, yes, security we will talk about in further slides. Maybe if you have any questions on security, you can ask me. Okay, so yeah, I have one more slide on challenges, so let me complete that. So now this is actually in terms of cloud native applications. I didn't use the term here. We are saying that microservices can be independently scaled up and scaled down. Dynamic scaling is possible, and that is the advantage. So if you have, let us say, in your large application, more than 50 different microservices, and you want to independently scale up a couple of services at any given point of time. For example, during the peak business hours, you want to scale up customer facing services, and during off-peak hours you have to scale up back-end processing services, and some weekends you have to scale up few services, or during the daytime some few hours you have to scale up few services. If that is the requirement, can manually can you handle all those scale up and scale down so quickly and so efficiently? If you have like more than 50 services, that is very difficult. So dynamic scale up, scale down, you can see the real advantage of microservices only if it is properly automated. If a proper DevOps kind of DevOps culture is built and properly automated, then only you can realize its benefits. And one more challenge with microservices is if one microservice fails at one because of let's say one infrastructure issue, or let us say some issue, because these microservices are deployed on different nodes and different servers. If one server is down or crashes or some problem happens, or one server becomes very slow in terms of processing, so it impacts the complete application. Earlier, because the same hardware infrastructure is used for the entire application, you have at least enough capacity to handle all the services. If one service is not one part of the application is not using fully utilizing the, let us say, RAM or any other resources, the other application is choking up, at least it will manage. But no, because these are individual services, if one service is choking and it is going down, then other services actually waiting because of the communication dependency on the service. So it's kind of a pack of card where one failure will impact the entire application. Somewhere some inefficient utilization of some resources might impact the entire application. It might it might go down. Debugging we just discussed, and consistency we just discussed. Okay, so those are the challenges in microservices. So each challenge has a solution. Industries, because adapting microservices, people have come up with lot of solutions, lot of tools and frameworks are there which take care of so many things, and lot of patterns are being used. So we'll see if possible patterns also. So before going to that, further into security. So let me ask this question: is security better in microservices, or is it a challenge in microservices in comparison with your monolith architecture? So is it an advantage or disadvantage of having this kind of an architecture for security?
I think it will be challenged because the attack surface has just increased.
Exactly, right. So attack surface has increased. Earlier there was only one application. So let's say that application is behind your firewall, and it has its own authentication mechanism. That is enough for your security. If it breaches, the entire application breaches, that is fine. But you have a security mechanism at one place. Now that you have multiple services, there are lot of open and endpoints or open places from where a hacker can attack your application. So attack surface is increased. So there are chances of more attacks. That is a challenge with microservice security. But the advantage is, if a service is compromised, only that service is compromised. Your entire application is not compromised. Your entire data is not compromised. If a user, if a hacker hacks your order management service, yes, it's a problem to your application. You are hacked, but still you can say that your user data is safe. Still, you can say that your product catalog is safe. So, so because of having multiple services, at least you have isolated the problem, isolated the hacks. Your entire application is not lost. So microservices architecture can alleviate some security issues that arise with monolith applications, but it simplifies security monitoring because various parts of application are isolated. Now, one more thing is, all applications doesn't have same security needs. An application which is having a customer-facing an interface may need some extra ports to be opened, and may need to be outside of your DMZ maybe sometimes. But all your other applications can be behind your firewall, inside your a particular security layer, physical security layer, or infrastructure security layer, and all ports need not to be opened at every microservice. So so independent services will have their own way of handling the security, even though the it is additional burden for security team to handle to enable security at each place, but individual services are safer compared to one large application. A security breach could happen only one section without affecting the other areas of the project. And distributed denial attack, it is more resistant because in case of DDoS, what happens? The hacker tries to bring down your entire application itself. Now with this microservices, even if a DDoS attack happens on any particular service, that service goes down, but at least other services will be working. At least other part of the applications can process. If not, the core business is failing, but still some part of the business is still running. So those are the advantages, but the challenges are this. We just talked about. More network areas are open to vulnerabilities. Less overall consistency because your security breaches happens at different services in different ways, and you have to make a consistent way of handling or security in all the places. That's the challenge. And we were talking about this greater area of attack is okay. We just talked about that. But last but what point I'm saying, the lack of control of third-party software. We are talking about innovations, and we are talking about adopting new technologies and new frameworks, right? So there, what happens is whenever you pick up a new technology or framework, you need to make sure that how secure this third-party software is. If that has some security loopholes, then hacker can attack. Now that we have multiple microservices, it is very difficult to control software adoption in all the services centrally controlling all of them. The core advantage of this is adapting new technologies. So that advantage becomes a challenge for your security management. Okay, so this is about microservices security challenges. And how about data consistency? One of the key thing in microservices is every service can have its own database. For example, a user management service can have a separate database, user database. A product or an inventory, let's say, has its own database, inventory database. A product catalog has its own database. So each service can have its own independent databases. And that is the advantage of microservice. So that way you can pick a different type of database. You can scale up. You can independently perform operations on that without impacting other services. So, but that advantage has a challenge here. That is, how do you make sure the data is consistent? If a transaction is happening and that is touching multiple services, let's say 10 different services, and while it is processing, one of the service is not able to commit the transaction, it fails. How do you roll back all of the services? How do you make sure that this transaction is rolled back in all its previous services? So that is a challenge. So for that, there are a lot of approaches, and a common approach is a pattern called Saga's pattern. What it says is all the services are kind of listening to a particular event publish subscribe model. So whenever a transaction happens, whenever is successfully committed in a particular service, it publishes an event, and all the services are listening to those events, and whatever the service is interested in a particular event, it listens to that service, that event. For example, order processing is happening. So there are a lot of services like inventory has to be updated as soon as order is successful. So inventory service is interested in order processing. A user service may not be interested in order processing, like this. So each service is probably subscribe to an event. An event is published, and this service is listening to the event, and it is aware of what is happening with that particular transaction. So each transaction is committed, but not fully committed, half committed, you can say, an intermediate state. And whenever it successfully commits into database and the state is intermediate state, it publishes an event. When all the events are completed, then these services actually commit the transaction. Otherwise, if one of the service says my event is not committed, then they'll all roll back. So it's a complete implementation. I'm not going to the implementation details, but there is a pattern which talks about handling of data consistency. Somebody has raised a hand. Any question?
Yeah. So here you said like microservice will have their own database. Okay.
Yes.
So my question is, when we are having monolithic application and we are migrating to, so is it
Your voice is broken. Can you repeat? When you are migrating from monolith to microservices?
when we are migrating from monolithic to microservices? So is it a good idea to migrate as well to different schema?
Yeah, I mean, microservices database having independent database is one such pattern. Microservice patterns talks about all those possible combinations. Shared databases is one approach. Independent database is one approach, or same database, multiple schemas is one approach, and it depends on how you are handling it. For example, uh, if we one service is writing into database and another service is just reading from database, not writing into database, then you can still have a shared database. The service reads from database and processes it. It will not have a major impact on database transactions, and no conflicts in terms of consistency. That is one thing you need to consider. Other thing is, when you are dividing the services in terms of your business domain, let us say this business domain has its own data which is totally independent of other services. An example is user database. User database, complete user management, right from allowing the user roles to updating the user addresses to anything. That is nothing to do with your product management, right? So in that case, when you are migrating from monolith to microservices, yes, it's a good idea to have a separate database altogether for this service, so that you can independently scale it. So depending on the kind of service, depending on the kind of database, and depending on the interaction between the services, you decide whether you go for a shared database, or you go for the independent database or independent schema as well.
Okay. And yeah, one more doubt I am having here.
Sure.
For 4 to 5 microservices, if it is referring the same table, so
Okay.
what, and how to migrate our to different schema? So how can we do that one? How can we place the common tables?
The very first thing is, if it is referring to common table, that means from the business domain perspective, it is the same service. Why is that a different business functionality if it is referring to same table? That is the first question. Because the way you divide the microservices in terms of the business domain. If it is order service, it should talk to order tables. If it is product service, it should talk to product related tables, something like that. That is one question. And even if in your case, okay, there are some two different business functionalities, but depending on same table, not every service is writing into the table. Some are writing, some are reading from the table. That way you can actually manage it using the shared database. These are the two things. And one last thing, uh, if a case is like this, yes, you need to have multiple services accessing a table or a set of tables, uh, but they are different business functionalities. What we do is, for those database management, for those tables, we create a separate wrapper service. What does that wrapper service do? That wrapper service just exposes APIs to perform CRUD operations or some basic operations on that database. So uh, what happens is, let us say that you have service A, B, C, three services are talking to some database D. So you create a service D. That service internally manages and calls database queries and everything. But all these ABC services do not talk to database directly. They talk to the service D, and they request, they post their queries, or they call the APIs. Those APIs are basically the CRUD operations. So that way, what happens is, database is managed by one service, but independent services are just accessing via a additional layer. So that way, data becomes consistent. Not clear?
Yeah, it's clear now.
Perfect. Okay. Any other questions? I think we are almost at 12:10 now. So, okay, if no questions, I'll move on. You can still ask questions at the end of the session. Okay, some of the industry best practices based on various white papers and articles I have captured here. When you are creating an application based on the microservice architecture, or migrating your existing monolith application to microservices, just make follow some of the best practices. That way it becomes easier for you to manage the services. One is each single service delivers one single functionality and one complete business functionality. When I say single and complete, for example, let us say order management itself. So order management is one single service. Let's not combine with shipment. Let's not combine with reverse logistics. Let's not combine with cancellation processing. Let's not combine with money refund. All these are different functionalities for your in your business domain. So order just performs the orders. It's a single functionality and it's a complete order processing. That's it. If any other additional functionality is needed, okay, have a separate service for that. So dividing your service into smaller application into smaller services, make sure that you understand the business completely and you deliver individual business functionalities, single business functionality, and complete functionality with each service. It should not be so small that half of the functionality is delivered by one service and half is delivered by other service. Let's not do that. Service size doesn't matter much. Some services can be big, some services can be small, but they should be complete. And same point iterated in a different way: autonomy over coordination. Try to make sure a service is as autonomous as possible. Autonomous in the sense as independent in terms of its functionality. It should not depend on so many services to perform its operations. As long as it has its own data, its own processing. For example, it takes the order, it validates, okay, based on whatever the data type of validation or order type validation, everything is good. It saved into database, it acknowledged back, and done. It is not performing lot of other operations of whether shipment is possible or not, whether payment is processed or not. One functionality is done. So second step, you can have a second service which is performing its own operations. So try to reduce number of coordinations and try to have more and more autonomous service as such. And same thing, if you talk in another terms, it is bounded context. That means one service should have its own context. You should not switch context. Currently, it is looking at this kind of orders, and suddenly the transactions switches to a different kind of a processing. I took this example, right? Your order processing, forward order processing, and reverse logistics and refunding. These are different contexts. Let's not mix over this context because they are all related to order. Let's try to divide it. One context, one function, one service. That's it. And in reality, some services can be very big, some services can be very small, but still that's okay. And one more best practice is, as much as possible, try to have asynchronous communications. Because synchronous communications, because of the latency between the communication between the services, your processing becomes very slow. As much as possible, try to take a request, completely perform it, save it, and make a asynchronous call via, let us say, messaging, MQ, or anything like that, and just move on. That means take another request, and your control is free. You can still continue with other services unless a response comes back. Even though asynchronous communications needs a little more logic in terms of handling it, but it is faster and it is easier to maintain. And in terms of management, one team responsible for one microservice, which is like a full life cycle of microservice. Writing is right from the requirement to designing to making any changes to maintaining its underlying stack and technology, to its testing, its build, everything responsibility of one team. That way it becomes much easier in terms of accountability. Data ownership as much as possible. Service should own its data. That means independent databases or independent services is a better approach if possible. And eventual consistency. Many times what happens is, a particular operation, let's say order is processed, and you need a lot of time to validate whether all the parts, all the operations are completed, right? From your payment validations to your availability of shipment method for that particular address, to availability of products and availability of service for that order. All these things operations are there. Instead of your waiting for all those operations to be completed to make to mark order as processed or order is taken, what you can do is you can have an eventual consistency. That means initially it is not consistent. Initially it shows that order is accepted, but it is not actually accepted, not fully accepted. But at a later point of time, as other services are performing and as they are responding back, your order status is slowly updated one by one based on the operation results, and finally it is up to date. And API versioning, if you have especially this case is when you have external clients, even if it is internal, if there are a lot of services accessing your service, or you are external facing your microservice external customer facing, then your APIs, making any change to the API will have impact to all the customers. If any structure changes in JSON structure or your XML structure changes, so to avoid any such problems with to your customers, and because of that you are not able to update, you are not able to release on time. Whenever there is a change needed for a particular customer, you add a new version of the API and slowly migrate all the customers to the upgraded version. That way you will not impact others. Okay. Okay, so let's see a couple of a few case studies how microservices have been adapted by various companies, various organizations. A best example is Amazon. This case study is available. I don't actually have a link unfortunately right now with me, because I downloaded it long back. I had captured it here, but you can Google search and find out. There is a very interesting case study, and some of the key points I captured from that complete PDF, Amazon's case study on microservices. And not only Amazon, there are a lot of other organizations, and they have published their white papers and case studies on how they adopted microservices. You can Google search and find out. So from that Amazon's case study, I captured a few highlight points here. So Amazon grew from, I think everybody is aware of it. It was a very small bookstore, maybe 15-20 years back. I don't remember, but yeah, from there it has become the largest e-commerce platform. So the platform the technology platform they are using is Linux, Oracle, C++, Perl, Java, and Java. These are the technology stack as per their white paper that they published. It is few years back. I downloaded that. So more than 55 million active customer accounts at the time, and 1 million, more than a million retail partners, and one page that you see on Amazon, whenever you go to Amazon.in, you see basic your name on the top right, and then the all the offers and discounts, and then the products, and then based on your interest, some recommendations, and lot of things, right? So one page, when it is built, it accesses somewhere around 100 to 150 services in the backend to get the data, like product service, recommendation service, user service, discount, offer service, I don't know, a lot of services. So that is the scale of that Amazon's application. So the big architectural change that Amazon made, and it is more than 10 years ago, so it made was to move from a two-tier monolith to a fully distributed decentralized services platform. For years, the scaling efforts that Amazon focused on. So this is a learning, if you see here. If you remember, at least 5 years, 10 years back, whenever there was a performance issue in any application, people used to try to scale up database, write effective queries or stored procedures or something like that to handle that amount of data and handle to improve the queries. So performance always they try to improve databases faster and faster databases because there are thousands of or millions of records in the database. So even Amazon tried the same thing. For years, their effort always was on the backend databases to scale more customers, more orders, because more data is coming, obviously, better database. But then industry has slowly moved out from there, and nowadays, nobody is talking about stored procedures. Nobody is talking about those query tunings and all. Now the scaling is at the application layer. So that is what Amazon realized, and it did it. In 2001, it became very clear that front-end applications could not scale anymore. It's not about back-end. Even front-end applications is a challenge. So the other problem they figured out is a database is a one single database, which is a shared resource, and it is very hard to scale out if it is a shared resource. So what they try to do is their database is split into smaller parts. Around each part created a service and an interface. So that way, what happens is only that service accesses that particular data. That's what I was just talking about earlier, right? You create a service, a wrapper service on a database. So that way, what happens is only that service has access to data. Other services do not directly hit the database. They access via this service. So they build this architecture loosely coupled and built around services. A service-oriented architecture is what they developed here. And each service is independently deployed and independently, growing. And then Amazon, this is, not luxury for every company, but Amazon could do that, build their own, underlying infrastructure and underlying, libraries and technology frameworks. Many third-party technologies are hard to scale to the size that Amazon is growing, especially communication infrastructure technologies. So they build their own underlying technologies, underlying frameworks and infrastructure to scale their applications. And then they did not stuck with one single approach. Some places they use JBoss and Java, and some places they use other stack, and then that is how they try to do it. And SOAP and REST web services, 30% SOAP. And again, as I told you, right, a few years back, I have downloaded it. I don't know the latest status, but nowadays industry is moving away from SOAP. It's almost everything is REST nowadays. And then teams are small. So we just discussed earlier, building a team around one single team ownership for each service, and that is what they tried. And limiting the team size, 8 to 10 people, and they call it two pizza team. Two pizza team means the team size is as big that 2 pizzas are enough for their lunch. So clear ownership. So that way, Amazon was able to grow their services, grow their application, and scale their application by dividing into smaller services. That was one example. Netflix is one example. And Netflix actually open source lot of its tools and frameworks that it has developed for their microservices architecture. You can see Netflix OSS, where you can see a lot of such frameworks. Regarded as one of the pioneers of the microservices movement. So they also had that problem of scaling. The Netflix number of user base and the way it is being used, right? So scaling was a challenge, and they adopted microservices. I'm not going into all these details here. So a few other things: eBay, SoundCloud, and Groupon. These are also the examples of companies adopting microservices to scale their applications. So I'll end here. There's 5 minutes more for your question answers.
Yeah, thanks, Lukman, for providing such a valuable session. You are all on mute. If you have any questions, please unmute yourself and ask the question.
Hello, one quick question.
Sure.
How do you see the role of test and QA automation evolving in microservices, and where do you think they are more effective or where they need to scale up more?
See, with microservices, basically you hear these two terms a lot: uh, DevOps and cloud native. I'm not directly answering your question. You're asking about QA, right? So let me come like this. So DevOps and cloud native, these are the two terms you hear a lot. And the reason is because they are independent and individual services, without automation, managing these services is a very challenging thing, right? So that is the reason DevOps came in, which is automating lot of CI/CD pipelines, and cloud native applications, which are automating and to effectively utilize your cloud benefits. Similarly, uh, even for QA, automation is the key for your microservices. Your end-to-end testing is okay. That is one area, but end-to-end testing is only for one particular complete end-to-end functionality. But most of the time, your testing is all on independent services, and that is because these services communicate with each other via either async or sync communication. API plays a major role there. So API automation testing or general automation testing, TestNG framework, and then your for UI your Selenium, and normally also with core Java your API automation testing, that plays a major role nowadays.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah, please unmute yourself and ask the questions.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. So I have one question. Okay. My project is from monolith to microservice. They are migrating.
Okay.
So me as a support DevOps engineer, so I need architect how many instances I need for my microservices and what are the load balancer I need. I need that information. So it would be great if you give me some sites where I can refer and I can implement the same architecture in my project.
Okay. So DevOps architecture you're looking for, right?
I'm a DevOps engineer actually in my project, so I need to design. So let us assume I have a developer who is developing microservices. Like he's giving jar file, okay. So let us take example 10 jars he is giving, okay. So if I run the 10 jars in one EC2 instance, my EC2 instance is going down frequently.
Obviously, yeah.
Yeah. So what is the correct way to deploy the microservices project?
You see, nowadays what is happening is when you say 10 jars are deployed and one EC2, that is not how it is being done nowadays. It is all about Kubernetes is one example. Your at DevOps level itself, infrastructure level itself, your containerization and orchestration of containerization is what is happening. But your DevOps without Docker and containerization doesn't make sense nowadays. So then what happens is when you deploy multiple jars, even though you deploy on one node in your Kubernetes, or if you're not following Kubernetes, let's say Docker Swarm, either way, it both are container management solutions. So either Kubernetes or Docker Swarm, what you do is you specify number of nodes on each number of services on each node, and you just go and add nodes. It automatically scales up, scales down. It automatically boosts one service from one node to other node based on the load and based on the capacity. So you don't have to manually decide and set up these jars on each node.
Okay. Okay. So you meant to say it's a best practices to go with the Docker or Kubernetes, right?
Yeah, that is how everybody is doing in this industry nowadays.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Yeah, if you have any questions, please unmute yourself.
Okay, one question. As you said, like every microservice should be independent. Okay. So consider in our project, it is like 4 to 5 features are there, and we have written like 5 microservices for that.
Okay.
Yeah, we want data from all these services. We have to collect it, and we have to give the response to the business. Okay, or on the UI. So,
Right.
so we have to call these 4 to 5 services maybe in common microservice maybe. Okay, and we have. So what will happen if 1 or 2 microservices will be down? So how can we handle these scenarios?
For fault tolerance of microservices, right? There are implementations. There are ways of doing it. For example, Netflix has an implementation called Histrix, which performs the fault tolerance, and even Spring Cloud has some fault tolerance features. So what they do is, whenever the service is down, how do you redirect your request to another node or another services is what is defined there. So you have to follow those patterns. Actually, we didn't get time to look into the patterns. So you have to follow those patterns while implementing services. So that way they can handle the fault if there is any failure.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, if you have any questions, please unmute yourself and ask. And in the meantime, I have posted a feedback URL on the chat. It's very simple. tinyurl.com/micro11april 11 APR. So if you can go to that URL and provide your feedback, that will be really valuable for us. If you have any questions, we can go for another 5 minutes. If you have any questions, please unmute yourself and ask the questions, please. I would please request all to go to that URL in the chat. tinyurl.com/micro11apr 11th April is the short form. So micro11apr, tinyurl.com/micro11apr. Go to that URL and provide your feedback, please. And if you have any questions, please unmute yourself.
So it is taking us to the registration page, not any feedback form page. So.
You need to sign in to provide feedback for that URL.
Okay.
Yeah.
The same link has the feedback as well. That section for feedback.
If anybody has questions, we'll go for a last question or one question if you have time. So if you have any questions, please unmute yourself. Otherwise, I would request all to provide feedback on that given URL, tinyurl.com/micro11apr. Any closing comments, Lukman? I think we are done with the questions.
I think thanks a lot for your patience, and we had good questions anyway during the session also and at the end also, so it was good. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, if you have, this is a very huge topic, microservices. Generally, when Lukman provides a corporate training on this, he takes about 3 to 5 days. So he did a very good job in consolidating all that information into 1.5 hour session. But I know most of your people might have some questions. So if you can provide that URL, we'll add your information. We'll add you into that our MFIRD group, and you can ask further follow-up questions. And this session will is being recorded, and the recorded session will be available in about few days. And that also you can go through tinyurl.com/mfird. That is the thing. Yeah, Asim, you have any question?
Yeah, actually, I was just asking, like, what was the aim of this webinar? I mean, like, because it's only one webinar, right? So, in future, are you conducting more webinars, or else do you have any institute where you give training, or do you give any help in getting a job? I mean, like, just to upskill. So, this it's a normal question, not about the topic one.
Yeah. So let me take this question. So the webinars are just to get to the brief introduction to any topic, right? And if you have developed interest in getting the details of any topic, so if the speaker comes up with a series of webinars, like in form of a workshop for a couple of days or couple of weeks, so then we'll go for that as well. So you can fill out your interest in that registration form itself. And we in past seeing the interest, we have gone for cyber security courses as well. We have experts in forums. So we have even Luqman Sharif is corporate trainer, so he can go for a series of lectures based on the interest and the people coming in, right? So cyber security, we have successfully completed 2 workshops. So similarly for other topics, if someone is coming with the interest, so we can do mashura for that. And if any speakers are ready for conducting this kind of thing, so we can go ahead. Hope I answered your question.
Yeah, thank you.
So in the forum here as well, in this session, all the participants, I request, there are sections there. If you are expert enough in any topic, if you want to share your knowledge with the larger forum, so you can reach out to us. You can fill that registration form. So inshallah, we can have a slot for you as well. Okay, it's a forum to give and take, right? So learn from the expert, and if you are expert, you share with others. And at the same time, you can convey the message to others so that more people get benefited across globe.
Yeah, thank you very much. And actually, in my chat, I did not receive any link.
There is in the chat, there is a link, tiny URL.
In the chat.
Um,
Yeah, now I got it.
okay.
Thank you.
Fine. So if no questions, I think we did. Luqman Sharif Bhai has done a great job, and Jazakallah for Riyaz Bhai for giving a great introduction of Luqman Sharif Bhai, and followed with a great and amazing session from Luqman Bhai. Hope all of us enjoyed, and thanks to all the participants for taking out your precious time during your Sundays. That shows how much keen we are to upskill ourselves and then be ready for the market tomorrow and the need of the moment tomorrow. Jazakallah. So if nothing is there, I think we can adjourn this meeting.
Yeah. Thanks all for attending. We are closing the session. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Jazakallah.